Hello, Temple. Thank you for joining the Wellness Resource Center to discuss safer sex today. My name is Kate Pavlovcak, and I'm the Sexual Health Program Assistant at the WRC. In honor of National Condom Month, we will be discussing all things safer sex. We have Dr. Pollitt from the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies with us here to help dive into this discussion about different safer sex practices and supplies. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, folks. So I'm Dr. Jen Pollitt, mostly known around here as Dr. J, and I'm an assistant professor in gender, sexuality, and women's studies, and the assistant director of the program. My PhD is in human sexuality, and I love every single thing sexuality education. So I'm excited to have this conversation and hopefully offer up some information that y'all can use as soon as you listen.
Awesome. Sounds great. We're so excited to have your expertise here with us during this important conversation, again, during National Condom Month as well. So definitely a great time of the year to be diving into these conversations.
In honor of National Condom Month, this is
Oh,
this is my beautiful, loving, snarky condom, crochet condom, created by one of our former GSWS students. So yes,
that is so funny. I love that. A third guest on the call that I didn't even know that we'd have today. Special
exactly.
guest. Yeah. Okay, great. So starting off, we want to talk about how we know that a lot of students who come to Temple have different experiences with sex education and have different levels of access to safer sex supplies. Can you talk a little bit about what safer sex is and reasons why students should engage with these practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So safer sex, I love that you call it safer sex instead of safe sex, right? No sexual experience is always 100% of the time going to be emotionally and physically safe. That doesn't mean it's going to be dangerous or harmful, but there are different things that we can do to make sure that we are emotionally and physically feeling as safe as we can and comfy and cozy so that we can explore, experience pleasure, know how to navigate things. And so sexuality education here in the US is kind of a patchwork. So some folks have really great sex ed, other folks have not so great sex ed, and then some folks have no sex ed at all. So it's important to talk about safer sex practices because it ensures or attempts to help folks navigate how to have the most fulfilling, satisfying, intimate, physical, and sexual experiences. I think there was another part of the question that I'm missing too.
Um, oh, the other part of the question was why should students engage in these techniques?
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about what it actually means to have safer sex. But one, to make sure you're protecting yourself against any disease, infection, something that's going to make you feel crummy or physically uncomfortable. And also to be able to navigate how to communicate, what your boundaries are, what your limitations are, what your hopes, dreams, wishes, desires are for the interaction, to make it sexy. Safer sex does not mean that things have to be sterile or feel like a contract, but it should be a conversation. And so today, hopefully, we'll give you some tips and tricks to navigate how to have that conversation, how to choose the best safer sex practices for you that work for you. But yeah, all of this is just so that you can have fun and relinquish some of that anxiety of not knowing what different things are available or how to talk about it or how to engage with the partner. So this is just in service of making sure that everyone can have as good of a time as possible.
Great. That's good to know. And I really like how you talk about it as not just a physical safer sex, but also emotional and then like the cross section with that too. So I'm excited to dive more into that specifically as well. So let's start off with talking about what are some different types of barrier safer sex supplies.
Yes. So probably you've heard of these things before, at least a few of them. So one is the external condom, often known as the male condom, and they can be made of latex, polyurethane, different materials based on whether or not someone has a latex allergy, or also just for sensation and pleasure, how it feels. There's also the internal condom, and that goes inside and is inserted inside the vagina. And then we've also got things like dental dams, which are again just a little sheet of either latex or polyurethane, other materials that are put over the genitals for oral sex that can be used. So you're not transmitting anything that way either. I also want to give a shout out to a barrier method that doesn't get enough attention, and that is the diaphragm. So the diaphragm was popular in the 1960s, 70s, kind of fell out of favor, but has now made a little bit of a resurgence for folks who are not necessarily interested in hormonal birth control. Diaphragms don't protect against STIs, but they do protect against pregnancy if used properly and with spermicide. But some folks may also choose a diaphragm as a barrier method for pregnancy prevention. Again, not to protect against STIs. That we still want to use condoms, dental dams, etc.
Good to know. Yeah, the diaphragm definitely does not get a lot of attention anymore. So that's a good one. Good deep take, I guess. Um, can you tell us a little bit about lubricants and why people might choose to use those?
Lube. Everyone needs lube. Lube is your friend. It's fantastic for pleasure, to get things nice and slippery and slick and juicy. A shout out to Smitten Kitten that has an incredible lube guide. It's 10 pages, so how to choose the lube that's right for you. Essentially, lube is really helpful for reducing friction, right? So especially if you're having penetrative sex, if everything is dry, then you're more likely to experience pain, discomfort, infection, tearing. There's also potentially a higher likelihood of transmission of STIs because of the little micro tears, and so little germs and bacteria and critters getting where you don't want them to get. And so lube is great for increasing sensation, reducing friction, keeping things nice and slick. Not all lube is created equal, so you want to make sure that when you're choosing your lube, if you are having partnered sex with another, flesh and blood human versus you're using a toy made of silicone or stainless steel or something else, so choosing a water-based versus an oil or silicone-based lube is important. Typically, if you're using a latex condom, you want to use a water-based lube. Most condoms already come pre-lubricated for extra sensation. You can even put a little water-based lube directly inside the condom, and again, reduces that friction. But lube is basically to make sure that everyone is feeling as comfortable and experiencing as much pleasure as possible. And I recommend folks trying out a variety of different types of lube. It's not a one size fits all, in the same way that condoms are not one size fits all. So try out different materials, different sizes, different brands. There are some really great online condom guides as well. So I recommend checking out the lube guides and the condom guides.
That's great. And we'll get more into what those online resources are later on, I think. But yeah, it's great. I didn't know that lube can help protect against STIs a little bit, which is a great thing to know too. Just another reason to be using lube. And also a shout out that I'll say again at the end of this is that we do hand out free lube at the Wellness Resource Center. So you can come pick up some packets if you would like to try out some different brands. Also I would ask if you can speak to any key considerations students may have when choosing a type of safer sex supplies. So this may maybe be like latex allergies or lube and barrier compatibility, correct use. You've kind of already gone over this, but just again,
Yeah. I think the other thing we have to talk about is like how much do they cost? Where do you get them? How
right.
accessible are these supplies? Right. So, thinking about the financial component, also thinking about the awkwardness of like, who do I get them from? Have I bought these before? If I've never bought a thing like this before, where do I find it? Like in the drugstore, or what store would I buy it from? How do I interact with like the clerk or the cashier if they're checking me out? Thankfully we've got self-checkout now, so you don't have to necessarily interact if you don't want to. But I think considering cost, availability, and accessibility, what type of sex are you having? What feels best for you? And so you want to make sure that if you're using a latex condom, again, you're using a water-based lube, because if you're using a silicone-based lube, that can sometimes degrade the latex in the condom and then make the condom slightly more porous. So then things are, traveling through that barrier that you don't want to. The goal is to have the barrier to protect everything. And so, also differences if you're having penetrative vaginal sex versus penetrative anal sex, making sure that if you're having anal sex, you're choosing a barrier method that definitely has lubrication and you're also using lubrication in addition. If you're having anal sex, the way the body works, the anus is not self-lubricating like the vagina is. So you want to make sure that you're using more lube to prevent tearing and also pain discomfort.
Right. That's a good consideration to have is considering, and the like environmental factors in terms of accessibility and price cost. That's a big consideration for Temple students as well.
Buy in bulk, get a bunch of friends together,
right.
order online, a couple hundred.
Yeah, if you can find somebody with a Costco card, like
Yep.
they sell that stuff there too. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that that's like a big thing that, people do have those cost considerations, but yeah, you can buy in bulk online with your friends. You can also, again, access the free safer sex supplies that we hand out at the Wellness Resource Center. You can get up to 20 condoms a month for free. You just need your student ID. And then that also is not tracked to you. Your parents can't see that you access safer sex supplies if that's a concern that you have. No one can see it. It's completely confidential.
Yeah,
so
also,
yeah.
if you're not having partnered sex, like let's say you are taking yourself on a sexy date,
right.
it's important also if you're using sex toys to make sure that you're using lube and also condoms on your sex toys too, to keep them in better shape, to reduce the likelihood that there's some leftover bacteria. Make sure you're washing your sex toys afterwards. Yeah. Also, if you're having partnered sex but using sex toys with a partner, using condoms can also be a great way to, again, prevent disease, infection, degrade the material from overuse, stuff like that.
Yeah, and for sure with that as well, you want to make sure that you're cleaning those, sex toys as well in between uses, especially if you're using them with other partners too, to again prevent that potential spread of infection. So next we'll move on to that sometimes students have difficulties when getting on the same page as their partner when it comes to engaging in safer sex. Can you speak to the importance of negotiating condom use and setting boundaries with your partner?
Yeah, this is really tough stuff, folks. And it's not just tough for young people who are maybe just starting to have sex or have been having sex, but it's still a difficult and vulnerable conversation to have, right? Usually also these conversations tend to crop up like in the heat of the moment when folks are about to or are already engaging in some sexual activity and behavior. That's not always, it's the most common time for that conversation to happen, but it's not always the most useful time or productive time for that conversation to happen. So if you can, try to have the conversation beforehand and establish like, hey, like you're pretty cute. I'd like to touch your body. I'd like you to touch mine. But just FYI, do you have a condom with you? I've got condoms with me. Don't anticipate that someone is going to be bringing their safer sex materials with them all the time. Always carry them yourselves too. It's not just like one person's responsibility. And so just to be prepared. So opening up the conversation beforehand, but understandably, if things are happening in the heat of the moment, right, you don't have to stop everything and make it this like really big deal and deliberate action. But just again, asking like, oh, hey, do you have a condom? Oh, if not, I can go grab one. I brought one with me. Or, hey, like I'm on birth control, but I also just am like really cautious about STIs. I got tested 3 months ago. When's the last time you've been tested? So making it conversational and casual instead of like, with like the big interrogative spotlight, and making the conversation like bigger than it has to be. Also, I would say practice having these conversations with your friends, in the mirror with yourself, even around non-sexual things, right? Setting boundaries of like the stuff you like to eat or not eat. No, I don't really want to like go out right now. I'm not in the mood. I'm just gonna get my jammies and like have a quiet night in. And so practicing setting boundaries in non-sexual ways, which will then make it easier to practice setting boundaries in, your sexual expectations too.
Yeah, that's a great idea too of like the practicing with your friends because that can feel, might feel a little bit silly, but even if you're doing and setting boundaries in every aspect of your life, but even if you're doing the like, hey, can we like role play real quick for a minute and I pretend that you are the person that I want to like, that's a great way you can do that with your friends, kind of make it like a experience for both of you as well. But yeah, that's a great way to do that is like practicing on somebody that you're definitely more comfortable with and like a pretend setting. Yeah, I haven't heard about that before, but I definitely
also,
want to use that in the
if you're
future.
not interested in engaging in a particular behavior, if you're having partnered sex, right? You don't have to say like, no, I don't want to do that. Or but what you can say instead is, oh my gosh, it is so hot when we do this or when I do this. It's so sexy.
Right.
I love when you touch me here. Or I feel all hot and bothered when we're doing A instead of B. Or like, hey, I want to take things slower. Like, I just want to luxuriate in this experience and like, soak you all in. I'm not really interested in like going much farther than that for right now. And so knowing that like, if you're saying no to one sexual behavior, doesn't mean that you're saying no to the entire sexual encounter. I mean, that might well be true also, but know that you can opt in and opt out like to all the things that are on the menu. And not deny yourself the experience, but just be more aware of, what your likes and dislikes are. And if you don't know what those are yet, yet because you're still learning and exploring, being able to communicate that too. Like, hey, I might be game for like a whole bunch of other stuff, but I just don't know yet. So like, I'm maybe willing to try some of this stuff out, but just to like let I may not like it or I may want to do something different, so we can mix it up.
You mentioned also talking about communicating with your partner about STI testing. Can you talk a little bit about what STI testing is and the importance of it in terms of safer sex and making sure that you're protecting yourself?
Yeah, STI testing is like going to a health clinic or the doctor for any other type of test. It's just that because we have such shame attached to sex and sex is taboo, a lot of folks don't know where to get it, don't know how to get it, don't know how to ask for it if it's not offered, are embarrassed to go, are rightfully nervous, right? Like, well, what if I do have something? And so the best way to increase the likelihood of people going to get tested and the best way to increase the likelihood of your partner telling you that they may have something and they do have something is to reduce a lot of the shame and judgment and stigma, right? So if someone shares with you that they have an STI, so like herpes, for example, right? Something that's like more lifelong, that is a testament to how much they care about you, that they want to let you know so that you can make an educated decision about the behaviors that you're comfortable engaging in, when and what to do when someone is experiencing like a particular outbreak or flare versus when things are more dormant. So you don't want to say, oh my gosh, ew, you have herpes, I'm not going near you. You want to say like, thank you for sharing that with me. That's a really vulnerable thing, right? And opening up the lines of communication that way. The other thing is that a lot of STIs can be treated with antibiotics and early interventions. And so you want to make sure that you're able to do that instead of not getting tested and then letting symptoms potentially linger, which then become bigger infections and more problematic. I would say, if you go into, like, if you have a primary care doc, if you have an OBGYN, if you go to an urgent care or sometimes CVS Minute Clinic, stuff like that, you can ask for a panel to be done and, it gets submitted through your insurance. There's also free testing here in Philadelphia, not far from Temple University. And you might have to wait like an hour, but yeah, there are services available. And you just want to make sure that you're keeping yourself healthy and as safe as you can, and that you're also keeping all the other people that you're engaging with as healthy and safe as you can. So again, reducing the stigma, I think, is the first step, and even opening up the conversation. So like asking someone, have you ever gotten tested? Oh, let's go together.
Right. Yeah.
Like let's go grab lunch. We'll go get tested. We'll like go treat ourselves to some ice cream afterwards. So
Yeah.
to normalize these conversations and not make it feel like it's such a big thing.
I know a lot of people have questions of like, well, what does that entail? Is it going to hurt? Like, are they going to, take samples from me? And like, what does this mean? Your provider at Student Health or at any other place you choose to go, like a Minute Clinic, urgent care, your primary care doctor, other resources around the city, they can give you a lot more information about it as well. But I would say, if anything, at most, it's uncomfortable, but definitely not painful, and not something to be afraid of. And again, like if you do test positive for something, it can be a little bit, it can feel a little scary, but there are antibiotics and treatment in place for almost anything that you could get diagnosed with. So it is treatable, and you won't be like, the shame of, having an STI makes you dirty or whatever. Like that is not what, the truth and the reality of the situation at all.
Yeah, we don't judge folks for getting colds, right? Here we are,
Right.
it's February. We're in the depths of winter and everyone's got something that's being passed around. And in the same way, we don't judge people for, having colds. We shouldn't judge people or shame people for having other types of infections too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And, yeah, that's something, again, it's like reducing that stigma by having those conversations, not just with your partner, but you can ask with your friends, like, hey, have you gotten STI tested recently? Like, I've been thinking about going. I'd love to go with you. And again, make it like a little event, group trip to student health services. Like, it sounds kind of
Mhm.
funny, but it's a great way to make sure that you're staying safe and doing it with your friends. And it can feel a lot more comfortable if you have somebody that you trust with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. So we know that having these conversations about STI testing, safer sex methods, and barriers, all that kind of things, can be very difficult. Do you have any advice for making sure that both you and your partner's boundaries are respected in these conversations?
Yeah, so I think that, I think when we talk about consent and boundaries, it can feel really black and white, like yeses and nos. But we forget, especially if, again, you're just starting out or if you've only been sexually active for, not that long, right? You like might not know what your boundaries are yet. So then what? Does it mean you just have to like opt out or do stuff that you don't want to? Of course not. So this is where the communication is really important. And again, not in this like big, overwhelming, like I have to say these words and do this stuff right now, but in a very more casual, normalizing, conversational tone, right? So if you want your boundaries to be respected, you have to know kind of what those are and then how to communicate that. Those are two different skill sets. So for the folks who already know, like, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, think about what are the things that get in the way of you being able to verbally or non-verbally express that. For the folks who don't know exactly what they like or what they don't like yet, I would say number one, go home, masturbate. Get to know yourself so that you can communicate again, verbally and non-verbally, and or what feels good to you to your partner. And when you're with your partner, if you're not sure what your boundaries are, what you want to try, what you don't want to try, be able to express that too. Like, hey, I think you're so sexy, or I'm really into you. And I'm excited to explore together. right? Like, what are the things that turn you on? These are some of the things that I think might turn me on. I'd love to be able to explore that with you. And then one other note about consent and boundaries. Rightfully so, there's a lot of emphasis on our verbal yeses, right? Saying like, yes, I want to do this. We've all heard of like enthusiastic consent, but I think that only takes us so far, especially when we look at how we're socialized into gender. So a lot of us end up saying yes to stuff that we're not that interested in or we don't want to do because we don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, or it's just easier to kind of go with the flow. So it's not like a hard no, but it's also not an enthusiastic yes. So what I always tell my students is to, yes, pay attention to what someone is saying, but also pay attention and become attuned to how their body is responding and reacting. Right. And so if they're saying, yes, I want to try this, but they're not moving, they look uncomfortable, they're sweating and not in like the sexy glistening kind of way, but in the like, I might want to get out of here, or I'm really like freaked out right now kind of way, and I don't know what to do. Right? That's where like that verbal yes is not as power packed. That means you should probably check in and be like, hey, I know you said you want to do this. Like it looks like you're like a little uncomfortable, nervous. I'm happy to like slow down, or like, if you're nervous and excited, like we can talk about that. But if you're not ready for that, or if we want to like shift gears, like that's totally fine too. So really being attuned to the physical body of the person that you're with, tapping into like, oh wow, like wow, I did that one thing and like their body just totally lit up and they look so relaxed and into it and comfortable and getting deep into it. But then being attuned to those spots too where there looks like there's a more hesitation or some anxiety or some discomfort, and just checking in. And that should go both ways. Both partners should be doing that for each other. So we want the verbal yeses, but we also want those embodied, attuned yeses as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great in terms of you want to make sure that if you're trying out new things with a partner, that you're having those conversations, also knowing yourself. And I think also we talk a lot about, again, this is kind of, how we're socialized often by gender and stuff, but the like, you know, you should be able to know how to say no, but also know how to hear no. And I
Yeah.
think that kind of preparing yourself, and kind of viewing rejection, like the no's, not as like a rejection of yourself, but just as like redirecting what you're doing and redirecting your actions. And I think that a lot of times we say yes so much because we know that we ourselves wouldn't want to hear no. But I think that kind of making it more of a thing that like no doesn't mean a rejection of you. It just means, kind of reconfiguring what the situation is. If you're, having sex, maybe switching gears, doing something else. So I think that that's something that's important. Like it's important to know how to say no, but it's also important to know how to hear no, to be able to, make sure that your partner also feels respected in those conversations. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I
like
think
knowing
that's
yourself as well is so
super
important.
important, right? Knowing how to hear
Yeah,
no and recognizing that, like, so what someone said no, right? We're
right.
resilient. Rejection doesn't feel good. If someone's saying no to everything, it doesn't always feel good, but we're also resilient. We recognize, like, hey, it's not personally about me. It's just like not what they're into or not what they're into right now. And so
Yeah.
again, building that muscle too to be able to hear no and feel worthy enough to say, oh, okay, cool. Like they're not into that, they're not up for it. Like, it's yeah, I'm not super jazzed, but I can handle it and it's all gonna be okay.
Right. Yeah. And respecting that when somebody says no, it's not something to spiral over to think like, oh, like, think negatively about that person. Like that is, it's a two-way street in terms of respecting a yes and a no. And you would want your own boundaries to be respected as well. So yeah, definitely just really important to keep that in mind as well. It's hard to know what to believe when you're seeing information on social media or other digital platforms. And sometimes I'm worried that the preconceived notions that I may have about safer sex are not the most accurate. Do you have any recommendations on how I can process the information I'm seeing online and making an informed decision based on that information?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say I know this is so hard, right? Because especially if we're on like TikTok or Instagram, or watching like really short videos, we live in sound bites. We don't have attention spans that are
Yeah,
incredibly
getting
long.
lost in those rabbit holes too.
Yep, and you're
Yeah.
just like, oh my goodness. And then all of a sudden, you're like some sort of conspiracy theorist over like condoms and birth control. It is hard to sometimes figure out like what is fact from fiction. So you want to make sure that you're getting information from a reliable source. So when I say a reliable source, like what does that actually mean? So, Advocates for Youth is really great. Planned Parenthood, Student Health Services, the Wellness Resource Center. Probably less so like an influencer on TikTok who might have like some interesting things to say, but that aren't actually grounded in like evidence-based peer-reviewed practice. Right. Sometimes it can also emphasize mis or disinformation can emphasize like failure rates of things instead of success rates. So, which is why I love where you started with this, safer sex instead of safe sex. Do condoms sometimes fail? Of course they do, right? Typically because of user error. And so also practicing putting a condom. Who doesn't love putting a condom on a piece of produce, right? So
Right.
practicing before you get into the actual situation. But knowing also what to do if a condom fails, right? What do you do? What happens next? What are available methods? When should you get tested? Stuff like that. So I would say look for trusted sources. And so you might have to like do like one or two more layers of digging and actually end up Googling or asking someone in your circle, like, hey, I heard this thing. Is this really how this works? Can birth control, make you infertile? Do condoms really reduce sensation, in a way that makes sex totally non-pleasurable? So do some fact checking and fact finding. Again, some really great resources are Planned Parenthood, Advocates for Youth, Scarleteen, which is designed with teens in mind. But I'll tell you, I think it's an unbelievable resource for folks of any age to learn about safer sex practices.
Yeah, that's great. And those resources are definitely super important. I know sometimes people on will see on social media even it can say somebody is a healthcare provider,
Yeah.
but again, it's like you're losing that peer reviewed and it might just be the experience that one doctor has had with particular patients and not the full view and the scope of everything. And it can definitely lean more negative. That always is what gets more hype and more traction online is the
Or
negative,
engagement.
scary stories, the horror stories. And those can a lot of times be outliers. So yeah, digging a little bit deeper, you mentioned some great resources, the Planned Parenthood, Advocates for Youth. Also, we love using Bedsider at the WRC. That's a great resource. They have so much information.
That's
Um,
awesome.
what was that one you listed earlier too that had like the guide for choosing
Oh,
lube? That
Smitten Kitten. They're not Smitten Kitchen. That's like their different website with recipes. But Smitten Kitten has a great 10-page lube guide. So how to choose your lube, what will work for you, things to consider when you're buying it, including price point, where to get it. I'll say if you're walking down like drugstore aisles, some of the brands are going to have harsher chemicals in them than others. So making sure that you're getting something that, is hypoallergenic or phthalate free. So it's just less irritating. If you're going to get something with like a flavor or a scent, really looking at like how many sugars are in there, what kind of sugar is in there to make it taste good, especially if you're using it and you're someone with a vagina because sugar can create yeast infections. So just doing, again, like your due diligence, like you would buying any other product that you're gonna like, use on your body.
Yeah, that's a great, great resource to have too. I'll try to make sure that we can link in the description of this video all of those different resources that we've gone over, so it's easily accessible for you guys. And also, if you think that like going online it's too overwhelming, you can stop into the Wellness Resource Center. We have a ton of different pamphlets available that are like quick, easy to read, but have really great information about a lot of these topics that we've covered today. And again, you can come to us for, safer sex supplies. Also, I want to shout out that if something happens where maybe a condom or a barrier method does fail, again, you want to cover your bases by going to student health and getting tested or somewhere else to get tested if possible. And then also, if you're a person who is concerned about pregnancy, you can get Plan B from the student health center.
There's a brand new EC vending machine on campus. And so it is free of charge. And so it is stocked, the machine will be stocked with Julie and Plan B. So there'll be two different kinds of emergency contraception. And we're excited to welcome that to our campus.
Yeah, that was going to be my next shout out, and that's super exciting, super new. That vending machine is located, I think, in the bottom of the student center,
Yep.
at the Essential Needs Hub. If you
Yep.
haven't been there before, definitely check it out. But if you haven't been there and you're scared of getting lost, you can just ask around the people that work at the office there. They can point you in the direction of the vending machine. You can also get period products, but then
Mhm.
also the emergency contraception. So just another resource that's available on campus for us to take advantage of as students. So yeah. Thank you so much for joining us in this important conversation. Do you have any closing thoughts before I read
Oh,
us
Kate,
off?
thank you so much for hosting this conversation. I would say, also, if you have any questions, truly, the folks at the WRC are so fantastic. You can also come see me anytime. I'm in Mazer 816, and my office is full of crocheted, crocheted goodies, sex resources, and advice. So, this was truly a pleasure, and thank you so much for starting a conversation that I hope all of you will take with you into the most intimate and sexy parts of your lives.
Yeah, and thank you so much. All of this information was so great. We hope that students can leave this discussion with some new knowledge and ideas about safer sex practices and feel comfortable advocating for themselves. If you or a friend needs support, please reach out to us. We are always happy to assist in students' wellness, and we hand out free safe sex supplies every month. So with your TUID, as I've said a couple of times before, but you can get up to 20 supplies each month. And the information about who picks up these supplies stays confidential. So you can come to us and get, lube, condoms, dental dams. And for National Condom Month, we're also giving away an additional free third variety pack of supplies for
Ooh.
people to explore and find what works for them. So definitely come visit us, pick up your free variety pack. The WRC office is located on the second floor of the Student Center, right above the food court. Yes. You can see our little sign if you're standing at the base of the stairs. You kind of just go up and follow the door back. There's signs pointing you towards us. You can also follow the WRC on social media at BeWellTU on all platforms. And with that, be well to you and thank you for joining.
Take care.